What's going on, fight fans? Welcome to the Zapata Brand Podcast, brought to you by Ringside. Go to ringside.com/podcast, and you too can get upwards of 40% off selected brands. Well, UFC 306 in the books. So is the Canelo Alvarez Berlanga fight. And who else to have on but someone who was in attendance at the historic UFC 306 event, but Kevin Iole from KevinIole.com and Kevin Iole YouTube channel. He could give us an eyewitness account of how it was. Kevin, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, George. How are you?
Well, after a busy week, it finally culminated Saturday night. I know you were extremely busy the week leading up to it, and excited about going to see the UFC in the Sphere. You got to walk in before any of the fans, so the media was in first. Give me an idea of eyewitness account of what happened when you walked in and what'd you see, and what'd you take out of it from that perspective first?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was amazing. When we first got in, they opened the doors at 2:30. So we get in, but then we weren't allowed into the arena. So we're in the press room, and we had this 90-minute span where we were in the building, but we weren't allowed in the arena itself. So they took us up on the atrium, and we did a little tour of some of the things. So you might have seen some of the pictures I posted, the hologram of Dana White doing the
how was that?
That was cool. That was cool.
Did it look real?
Everything. Oh yeah. It looked really good. It looked really good. They did a great job with that. The giant championship belt and everything. So it was just the arena concourse that all decorated, right? So that you saw how they had that. So that was nice. So at 4:00 we were allowed to go into the arena and go and check it. And so the first time I walked in with John Morgan, and the first time you walk in, you just see how big it is, right? Like I had been there, but when you see it with the octagon in there, right? The octagon looked like a tiny little dot, it was like small, right? And against that big wall in the back. And then to see how they had the wall, they had like the gold colors up, as we walked in. So immediately, George, it was really impressive. But then as the preliminaries were going on, it didn't really change as much as I knew, they were saving the good stuff for the main card. But I thought there was going to be a little more, razzmatazz in the preliminary card, and there really wasn't. So it was, just that kind of gold, and then it shifted at one point to blue, and then it was a little bit purple, but nothing really changed. There wasn't any special effects of any note, or any significant note. And I was going after first seeing it and going, whoa, and then you kind of get a little underwhelmed. You're going, okay, this is we're all. But then the main card came, and it was like, Jesus. And it was really incredible what they did in that main card. And, there was at one point in the Day of the Dead video that they put up, right, there was marigolds coming down on the screen, and they dropped marigolds into the audience. And you saw them coming off the screen, and it felt like they came out of the screen onto us, right? Another point, there was a wall, and the wall was breaking, and it was kind of like rocks and whatnot, coming down, and you wanted to turn away because it felt like it was coming at you. And because of the curve of the sphere, it made it look like a three-dimensional quality. The video quality was phenomenal. The color was incredible. So they made, you've been to UFC events, and you see in the corners how they have those video screens at four ends of the arena, right, in all the corners. And I don't know how big they are, 20 feet maybe. Well, they had, 80-foot screens in these things. They were massive. And they were actually on the wall, but they made them look like they were off the wall at different points. At one point, they had it where it looked like it was in a thing of wood that somebody had, it was like kind of in the Old West days, right? And they had, somebody had nailed wood together and put the screen in the middle of the wood.
Oh, shit.
That was really, really crazy. And then before each fight, in the center between the two screens, they would put up the tail of the tape, right? And the fighters were like 40 or 50 feet tall and all of that. And it just looked really, really good. And I found myself, like, normally, even with the, the HD recordings, on the screens that they have, you want to watch the live action. But at the Sphere, I found myself, because the screen was right above, I found myself just watching the screen because it was bigger. It was so clear, and you got a perspective that you don't normally get watching it live, in the arena. So I was really, really impressed. Went from kind of being underwhelmed a little bit to going, holy smoke.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit for a couple questions. Number one, this is a far cry from Jaws 3D. I remember back in the day, you put the glass way far than that. But to be there in the crowd, now the Sphere is shaped like you it's like a theater, okay? So it's going up. There's no people in the back, okay? You said it's like a dot in the octagon. Is that optimal for people that are sitting way up? Because you're fitting 14,000 in one section as opposed to around the entire arena. Did you think was there a bad seat in the house? Or
I did not move to go up. Now, the fourth level is steep, right? And it looks like it sits right down on the stage, and so I was not up that high. I wonder, but the screens were right there, right?
Right.
But the octagon, like, you go into, say, T-Mobile Arena or any, hockey, basketball arena where the UFC is, and that is big. The octagon takes up a lot of space on the floor, much bigger than a boxing ring does, right? I mean, so you have a lot of space taken up from that. And when you saw it in this place, because of how much bigger it is than an NBA arena or a hockey arena, it just looks smaller.
Did you so obviously you were front row, so you're seeing that, and you found yourself looking up?
So media was not front row. I was in the front row of the media. So unlike where we normally are, we're normally like where the fighters would exit at, right?
Yes.
And so the octagon is directly across from us. That's not where we were. So this time we were kind of, as we looked at the octagon, it was to our left, and a little, we were kind of at an angle, like, maybe a 45-degree angle back from it.
Oh, okay.
So I was maybe 40, 50 feet away.
So you found yourself, though, like you said, found yourself looking at the screens.
Yeah.
Did you find that uncomfortable at all, or no?
No, because of where we were on. We had a little riser. They put us on a little riser, and we were angled perfectly. They had two screens all the time, and every now and then they will put a third screen in the middle that, from where we sat, was directly above the octagon. But it was easy to look at either the left screen or the center screen. The right screen, I would have to do that, a little bit, because it was over my right shoulder. But for the left screen or the center screen, they were perfect.
So let's talk about the fights real quickly. The co-main event, not necessarily well. Let me go back. Let's do this. Let's go to Ortega fight. Ortega versus Lopez. I thought it was an exciting match, but I think someone took a one-sided beating. Yes. Ortega, I think I give him credit for hanging in there, because he took some massive shots, to the point where you look at that beating as saying this could be something towards the end of his career here, because that beating was very rough. And he's been in a bunch of wars, but this one particularly got me nervous because of that first punch kind of combination. It kind of dropped him and then hit him with a punch, and he got back up, and then the beating continued. And I know you asked Lopez about that punch. Have you talked to Brian Ortega at all after this fight?
I haven't seen Brian since it ended. He went to the hospital, and so was not back in here. So I have not seen him. He checked out okay. He and, believe it or not, Irene Aldana both checked out okay. Irene, my God, she stitched all over her face. Oh. But Brian, but Dana said that Brian, was given the all clear. But I agree with you, George. I mean, I think, he took such a beating, and he has taken some punishment in quite a few of his fights. And, what heart he showed in hanging in there, because when he got dropped and Diego went down, Diego landed a lot of shots, and then he dropped elbows on him, and he realized at that point he tried to take the back, and he wasn't able. So he finally decided, I'm going to make him stand up. I think he might have been better off making him stand up right away. And he might have been, because he had a pretty significant edge in the stand up, especially after he hurt him so bad, right? but hard to fault Diego for much of what he did. That was pretty impressive.
He looks like a guy who's a star in making, Diego. I mean, that was impressive, very impressive. And he's had a few fights in the last couple. How many fights? He's had a bunch of fights recently.
Oh yeah, I mean, he fought UFC 300, he fought UFC 303, now he fought UFC 306, and he had a fight before 300 too. So he's been a busy guy, right?
He's staying busy.
And so he's keeping himself active, and you got to like that, I mean, and he's put himself up. He said at his press conference he wanted to be the backup for Holloway Topuria. And when Dana came in, Dana said that he would allow that. He said, this kid does everything we ask him to do and more. And so, yes, he goes, whatever he wants, I'll do. So, I don't know if it's official yet. But I guess he's got to heal from the fight and whatever, but that'll be what he's going to do. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And actually, what I was thinking is that's actually very good for Lopez to fight as much, to get himself out there in a time where they're trying to build that Mexican base. We were talking before about the facility that they're putting up in Mexico for UFC, the PI there. That'd be good, and make him the face there for Mexico for the lighter weights. That's pretty good. It's a good idea.
I wrote that on Friday. That one of the things that they needed and one of their goals was to try to get a superstar from Mexico. They've had stars, but not superstars, right? They haven't had that big guy, that Ronda Rousey, that George St. Pierre. It's going to be hard for anybody, any country, to produce a Conor McGregor, but they haven't had anybody of that ilk, right? And I think that part of the reason that they wanted to do this show was to do that, and that was something that I think was a goal. And I think Diego, hey, look, he looks like he's going to be the real deal. I mean, he had 3 first round finishes in a row, I think it was, and then he had the Ige fight, which how can you blame him for not finishing Ige, given the significance of what happened to him, all throughout. I mean, just pretty crazy.
He has the charisma too. I get that from. There's some people that have that charisma factor, a good-looking kid, and he does have that. I think he does too.
He does, and then think about what he did, right? Think about what he did. He's in his fight, the most important fight of his life. Then he runs to the back and he puts on a corner outfit, and he's the coach of Alexa Grasso.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that next. Maybe he should have jumped in. It would have been a little bit of a better, that fight disappointed me. And because when I spoke to you before, and I spoke to Mike Bond about it, Valentina seemed like she was destined. This was our fight that she was going to prove a point, move on to the next opponent, and continue her trek towards being, one of those legends in the women's UFC. Didn't pan out. I don't know whether it was just, that fight just didn't do anything for me. Put it that way.
No, it didn't do anything for me, but I'll say this. She proved a point, right? She won all 5 rounds, and she won all 5 rounds in dominant fashion. So, that is, when you do that, you're proving something. Now, she did not make it exciting. It wasn't like she got in there and started throwing hands and, just pummeling, Alexa with her hands, which people would have been into. But I mean, the sad part about that was the energy was off the charts, because you had, take just the main card. Now, the end of the preliminary card went good. The preliminary card started a little slow and then it built. But then the main card, you had that Osborne Rodriguez fight, which was really a lot of fun.
Right.
Then you have Del Huber Ribovics, which was, one of the best fights the UFC has had in a while. Then you go to Ortega Lopez, right? And so you're going boom, boom, boom. The place is going nuts. The energy is high. And then that fight happened, and it was like, oh my God, it was just, it killed the place.
Listen, when Dana White starts criticizing you and the co-main event, that wasn't good. That wasn't good. So let's skip over that a little bit. She did what she had to do. She moves on. That fight's in the books. No more. She's not going to. Let's go to the main event. What the hell happened to Sean O'Malley? It didn't seem like he had it.
You saw his post he put up on Instagram today. He said, I have no excuses. I felt okay. There was nothing. goes, but in the fight, he goes, Merab was stronger than me, and I didn't feel, I didn't have any extra juice. I just thought he gave him too much respect, right? We knew the pressure. Like, I had a bad week on my picks, right? I had a bad week pick-wise, and I thought O'Malley was going to win that fight. And I thought O'Malley was going to, jab a lot and move, and then at one point, set his feet 1-2 and land a big one, and then, kind of finish Merab off. And he never did that. And I don't think he really let his hands go enough to ever get that. Now, he got that kick in the fifth round. It's kind of a desperation time. He's in the final 9 into the fight, and he hurt him to the body. And so, he wins the fifth round because he hurt him like that. But, I just felt like, I asked Dana the question, and I was on the UFC Unfiltered podcast yesterday with Matt Serra and Jim Norton, and Matt really disagreed with me. I said that I thought, O'Malley maybe kind of froze up in the moment. He thought it was Merab's pressure and that I should give credit to Merab, right? But I said, I kind of felt like right off the bat, you didn't see O'Malley come out there. He threw a back kick to start the fight, but he didn't he didn't have the rhythm that I thought I was expecting him to have. I thought right off the bat he's going to have his jab in Merab's face, and he didn't. And so I don't know if maybe all the pressure, and he walked out to Lupe Fiasco superstar. So you're like, and he knew the event was kind of set up for him to succeed, right? And I think that would have put him on that next level. But who knows why he didn't do it, but he sure just never really got into the fight.
Dude, you got me to change my pick. That's how convinced I was, because I was like, you know what? Yeah, so I'm out now on your track with the bad picks too. But he seemed a little different than he was when he fought Aljo. There was just something different. I didn't know what it was exactly. And then when the first round started, I'm like, I think he might be in trouble, where it just looked like he couldn't pull the trigger. He just couldn't. I don't know what it was. There was something there. But overall, let's talk about the finances, because that's the question I keep getting answered on my channel. I have people that were split down the middle saying, this is going to be an absolute bust. It's not going to go nowhere. He's going to do it one time. This was a very successful event. And I mean, can you briefly go over why it was so successful, so my people start busting my ass about me trying to say, hey, listen, I've said it before. Dana White is the smartest businessman I know. This guy's not going to make this lose.
They made a ton of money. It might have been their most profitable event ever. So for the first time, they had a title sponsor. So Riyadh Season paid them. I don't know exactly what it was, but I believe it to be 8 figures. So you're getting an 8-figure title sponsorship. The gate ended up being $22 million. Okay. They had 34 new sponsors in that event. Everybody was paying $1 million or more.
Kev, for clarification, the gate is, so people understand, the gate is just the revenue at the show, correct?
The ticket revenue.
Perfect. Go ahead.
So that was a UFC record gate, right? So he thought they were going to get to, one of the things, like, and this was, I should tell you this, like Dana had said, the Contender Series, it's a sellout, and people go, well, there's a couple hundred tickets left. How is it a sellout? There are individual tickets and whatever, and they're also sometimes in spots where they may have to kill them depending on if they need to put extra, things in there, like are they going to be behind screens or things like that, obstructed view seats. So sometimes they have seats where they say, we're not sure we can sell these seats. And then they determine on the day of the event, if the seat, or the day before the event, if they can sell those. So, it was a functional sellout the day before. They could have gotten to 23 million. They ended up at $22 million worth of tickets sold. So, you talk about, the sponsors they had, where they got a title sponsor, they got all these sponsors that are paying $1 million or more to be part of the broadcast. They also get a fee from ESPN for every pay-per-view. So they're getting $20 million from ESPN for every pay-per-view broadcast they do. And then if the pay-per-view exceeds a certain number, it's different all the time, so you never know what it's going to be. But like ESPN buys the rights to the pay-per-view. So that's why the prices have gone up. ESPN now controls the pay-per-view, right? But then what ends up happening is the first $20 million of all that go to ESPN because they paid UFC $20 million. Mm-hmm. Then beyond that, they have a revenue split that goes beyond that, right? So we don't know what the pay-per-view numbers are right now.
What do you anticipate them to be? Just if you were to estimate,
I think they're going to be around 750, right? I think
really that high.
I think it's going to be a good number.
Okay.
There was so much hype around that. So now just figure 750 times what do they charge for it? $775. So
yeah,
look where that goes. So there's I think 175 million, right? So
75 times 750,000. You're doing 56,250. 56 million. 56.
So 56 million. So so they made the first 20 million, and then they're splitting after that. So they're looking. So it was an insanely profitable event for them.
Right. So that goes. Now, that being said, though, do you think they go back to the Sphere or no?
He said no. Now there was two things he said at the post fight. He being Dana. That I thought were of note. Number one, I asked him, I said, hey, I know you said you weren't going to do it anymore, but it was so successful and you pulled it off, and now you can do it and you can tweak little things that maybe you didn't like. Will you do it again? He said, we have a deal with MGM that precludes us from doing that. So that is number one. But then he said number two, which came as a surprise to me, there's an arena project in Las Vegas, and he met with people that day that's going to be in Las Vegas, another arena project. So I should tell people, because I know I told you a little bit about this. So we have T-Mobile Arena, which is where the Canelo fight was. We have MGM Grand Garden, which is basically across the street from T-Mobile Arena. We have Michelob Ultra Arena, which is at Mandalay Bay, which is a couple hotels down from T-Mobile Arena. So we have three arenas right there that seat big capacities. And then about a mile and a half down the strip off Las Vegas Boulevard, there's going to be an arena put in there, a 25,000 seat arena that is being built, private money with hopes of getting an NBA team. So we knew that was going in. Then on top of that, in addition to having the baseball stadium being constructed now, and we have a Legion Stadium, all that is in a very similar area. Dana now comes up on Saturday night and says there's a new project being built, and if it gets built, we, meaning UFC, are going to be a big part of it. So that would tell me that might, they might, if this thing ever goes off the ground, have their events at this place, wherever this is. He didn't give any details, and so far nothing has emerged about who the group is or where it is. But usually for him to say something like that means that something has to be fairly far along.
Yeah. Would it ever behoove him to just make it, that property that's right by the headquarters over there, or even by Durango, the one that he built? Wouldn't it behoove him to just put his own arena right there?
Yeah, so people, we're talking to people who don't know Las Vegas and where everything is, right? Okay. And so, the Las Vegas Strip, Las Vegas Boulevard is the resort area. That's where all the big hotels are. And that's where T-Mobile is. And that's the best place to put it because, everybody is within walking distance, pretty much no matter where you're staying. Or, if you want to take a cab or whatever, it's a short cab ride from no matter what hotel you are in to get there, right? But the majority of people who are going to go to an event, say at T-Mobile Arena, they're staying at Park MGM, New York, MGM Grand, all those hotels that are just, surround T-Mobile Arena. The UFC campus is about 2 miles west of that, maybe 3 miles west of that. And there's only one casino on that strip, that, the newly opened Durango Casino, which is a relatively small casino in terms of hotel rooms. So now you're going to have everybody driving and moving, and I think there would be a big congestion up there. And I think that the whole reason that the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority spends so much money is they want people on the strip, right? They want people on the strip in those hotels, staying there. So I don't think that's probably ever going to be where they go.
Well, let's change gears and go right down the street to T-Mobile Arena last Saturday night. Also, Canelo Alvarez going against, I'll tell you what, he surprised the hell out of me. Edgar Berlanga. We'll get into that in a minute. But before that, it was similar to UFC. You had a great, not so much a great fight, an action-packed fight. Caleb Plant, Travis McCumbee, back and forth. And by the way, he was knocked down twice. I know I said that. But Plant was knocked down twice, once legitimately. The other 2 times he got hit, he went down, and they called it a slip. That was a punch. But a great fight, back and forth. And then finally, I think McCumbee's experience kind of got the worst of him. And, with Plant switching his game plan to fighting inside, kind of bullied him up. But the next fight, and this is why I want to go to the next fight, Danny Garcia, Erislandy Lara. This fight is almost identical to the Brian Ortega fight, meaning that this might be the end, and the beating he took, it didn't look good. Something was off with him. Danny Garcia hasn't been in crazy wars, but he's been in enough to have him, when you're in Philadelphia, you have the Philadelphia gym wars. But he wanted out, I thought, from the get-go. It just didn't seem right. And I don't know if you saw the fight itself. Wasn't a great, what was incredibly bad. It just was really boring. Danny's a guy who wants to counter off a little bit. And Lara's he's not gonna be offensive, even though he's had a bunch of knockouts lately. Give me an idea of that, of what you thought of that.
I think Garcia, you get guys that when the end comes, it often comes fast. And I think we saw the end very quickly there, right? I think, Danny got to the end of the line. When you can't pull the trigger, like you mentioned about O'Malley, I think O'Malley's different. O'Malley's still young in his career and everything, but Danny's had a lot of fights. Then he hadn't been active for a while. You're coming up, then you're moving up a weight class. I think it's too big of a weight class for him, right? He's not that big of a guy. I think all that kind of conspired, and I just think it's time for him to walk away and say goodbye. That is kind of what I think of the picture. Like, is he going to win a world title again? Well, look at, let's say if he drops down even one weight class, he's got Terrence Crawford at that weight class. He's got Sebastian Fundora at that weight class. Errol Spence is coming back up, who, whether Spence ever fights again, I'll never know. But, there's a lot of guys at that weight that I think would be problems for Danny. Clearly not big enough to fight at middleweight, so I think he's kind of, come to the end of the line. I don't think he has what he once had. He had a good career, a fun career, fought a lot of good guys. I think he's reached his peak.
Yeah, and that's, you never want to be the one to say he should retire, what have you. But here's a guy who saved his money. I believe made a lot of good investments. Just from what I've heard here in the Philadelphia area, he's made good investments. So he has it, and this is not for a money issue, which I'm happy for, because I think he's done well. His father's been very good with his career. And I think it's time for him to say, hey, I could do something else. I know he's in the promotion business here in Philadelphia. He manages a couple guys that I know. I'd like to see him step away, even if he has one last fight, fight somebody who's about maybe like a Keith Thurman who's on his way out too. You know what I mean? Right. Do a rematch of him and maybe get some money out and do that. And then step away. Then step away. I think that's the best thing for him. But
I don't know if there's any reason to fight again.
No, I didn't think so. But and the only reason why I say that is because I know he's made good investments with his money, and yes. Which I'm happy for. The main event. Let's go to the main event. Surprisingly, Berlanga goes the distance here, and he kind of won me over a little bit. I think his charisma, his chutzpah, is that what they say over there with the Italians? They say chutzpah. He did. And
Jewish, they say that.
What is that? Is it Jewish?
the juice that they say that.
Okay. So it puts chutzpah. All right. And then, I mean, he showed me something, believe it or not. I thought he made a mistake backing up half the fight, but what do you think of that? I mean, and then we'll go to Canelo, but he showed me a little something, more than I expected from him.
He showed you something. He didn't show me much. I didn't think he really gave, I think he was fighting to not get knocked out, right? That's what I thought, I don't want to get knocked out. I don't want to be embarrassed. And so that, was he out there? Look, to me, I look at a guy in that situation and he sees the odds against him and you got a chance, right? But you go out there and you say, I'm going to throw caution to the wind because what is the chance, and you fight maybe a little more aggressively. Like I'm going to equate it to Dana White's Contender Series, right? Those guys who go on the Contender Series don't fight the way they normally fight because they know Dana likes you to take chances and fight crazy and make these wild shows. So they fight that way to please him. And I think in the case of Edgar, that's how he needed to fight against Canelo. I don't know that any strategy would have been successful. I think Canelo is just a better fighter than he is and a more skilled fighter. But I think for him to maximize his chance of winning, go out there and try to hit Canelo early, make him uncomfortable, put him in a position where, he's now getting to be an older fighter, right? We still think of Canelo as a young guy, but he's, kind of an older fighter now, and put some pressure on him and make him, have to defend and make him have to work. And I didn't think he did that. I kind of thought that Berlanga showed up and just was like, I don't want to get knocked out. I'm getting a big payday. And yeah, if I can land a big shot, great. But I don't think he really, quote unquote, went for it.
You don't think in spots where he used his jab effectively, his biggest issue was we started going backwards. I don't know why he went backwards. But when he used his jab effectively,
like an example of what's going on. Like I don't think he totally shit the bed, right? I mean, I wouldn't say that. But I think that, he clearly wasn't in Canelo's class and he didn't do anything to, maximize his chances. And that was it, and you lose, 10 rounds on 2 cards. I mean, what did you really do? Right.
Right. But I think that was more of an indictment on Canelo. And I'll say this. There was something we talk about pulling the trigger the last 3 times. Canelo, when he got him hurt and dropped him, he didn't really go after him. And there was a couple times in spots there, 12, 15 punches around, which he normally throws in the 20s, but he didn't seem like the Canelo had that other gear to get this guy out of there. Against somebody like a Benavidez, that ain't going to work. That is not going to work. I've changed my pick, by the way, as far as I was leaning towards Canelo. What I saw on Saturday night, I would lean towards Benavidez if they ever do fight. Who knows? But there's a different gear here because I don't think Canelo's. It just seemed like that's why Berlanga stood in there. Is what I'm trying to say. He gave him the opportunity.
Well, think about it. Canelo has fought 66 times now as a pro. He's fought a lot of tough guys. He was in there 3 times with Gennady Golovkin. He fought Danny Jacobs, Floyd Mayweather, Erislandy Lara, Austin Trout, Miguel Cotto. You go on and on with the guys that he fought that are tough guys. And, and he's winning most of these fights, but you take punishment in those fights and then the training camps that you go through and everything. And, he's no longer, a 25-year-old, right? And I think it's a different Canelo that we're seeing. And I think part of the, he's good enough that he can beat these, B and C level guys that he's been fighting recently. But hey, if he fights Bivol, again, was that good enough to see him with Bivol? Like, I just don't see it. Can you imagine him fighting Artur Beterbiev now?
Well, he wouldn't even answer the question. I know Brandon Taylor from True Sports had asked him after, like, Canelo, his PR guy's like, no, he's not answering. Well, he turned around and asked. He actually asked the question to him. He would not answer it. He said Bivol, but he said, well, what about if Beterbiev wins? Turned around and walked away. Yeah. That is a smugness to me that it's starting to turn people off. I mean, you just if you don't want to fight him, so be it. That's fine. What do I care? But don't be so smug to say I'm the best. I fight the younger ones. I fight the Tigers. Really?
Yeah,
that seems a little different.
he's done that for much of his career, right? But now the last, like you saw my story that I wrote last week,
Yeah.
where I broke his career into 5-fight, and you go, oh, wait a minute, look at the differences, as the competition goes around. And you can disagree with my ratings and those things, whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is, he's fighting much, much easier competition now than he was, 16, 17, 18 range, right? I mean, much easier competition. And the fact that he doesn't want to fight Beterbiev is telling, right? And again, I'll say this, if you want to, you fight whoever you want to fight, but think of the fans. And that's what really galls me. Canelo is in charge of this train. The pay-per-view price was $90 because of him. And the price of those tickets in that arena, which were astronomical, the brokers had a hell of a time getting rid of them. Now they did, and we're never going to. In Nevada, will not. They succumb to pressure from the promoters, and they won't. They no longer make public the club report, so you don't know exactly how many people came out.
What was the reported gate? Did you get that or no?
I saw it, and I'm drawing a blank now on what it was, but I don't remember exactly. But they had 20,000 people announced in the building, so that probably told me there was 17, 18,000 in there, because that's what boxing promoters do. They exaggerate it a little bit, especially knowing that they have competition. So they're going to make it look better. But Nevada no longer releases that information, so we can't see how many comps that they gave out and how many free tickets that they gave out. And those are, the promoter can pay the tax on a ticket. And then as long as you pay the tax, it's considered a ticket, right? And so, what is the tax on a, $3,000 ticket? And that's all that they're paying. And now they give that ticket away, and, it looks like there's a bigger gate and there's people in there, but they never got that money in hand. But I just kind of felt like Canelo controls those kind of things. And if you want to fight fighters the level of John Ryder and Berlanga and Charlo, super welterweight, okay, put the prices down, right? Don't charge us this top dollar and act like you're taking on the biggest challenge. And every fight, I'm the best. Okay, you're the best. Look at Noe Inoue's doing. So he had his first little bit of a step down in a long time. But I mean, look at the opponents that he's fought, fight after fight after fight after fight.
And one of the things that you said that was very telling, you said that De La Hoya would put on a show on an HBO. Now, we don't have an outlet like that now, but put on a show to fight a Stevie Forbes, fight a Gotti or something like that, but it would be free on HBO.
On HBO.
Correct. To kind of say, hey, this one's for you. We're going to give this back to you, build up your base a little bit more, and then fight a guy, but then again, De La Hoya fought everybody. I think that's a different case study. Definitely a different case study than what you got going on here now, because they also don't have HBO, to be fair. They don't have HBO, Showtime to do that.
He could fight on Amazon Prime, right? And, you'd have to be an Amazon Prime subscriber, but don't pay extra for it. He could fight on regular DAZN, and you have to have a DAZN subscription, but he doesn't do that. That's not what he's doing. When he goes on, you're paying extra. So you're paying $225 a year for DAZN, and then you got to pay the Canelo fee on top of that, right?
Right.
And that's bullshit. That is, when you're fighting those kind of guys, that's where I have the problem. Charging the amount that he is, that's galling.
Right. Especially nowadays, and that's why, again, people turn to streaming it and stealing it. They're not going to pay that money for that stuff. They just won't do it anymore. You might have gotten away with it when you didn't have all the access to all the technology. Now that you do, you better put something on that people want to watch. And I do believe people will pay. Dana White's a perfect example. If you're saying it's about 750,000, they're going to pay if you put on a show, whether it's because of the event or because of the show and the fighters. They're going to go. They're going to show.
Yep. I mean, the one thing the UFC does is they promote their fights well and aggressively. They try to make even matches throughout the card. Nobody hits the mark 100% of the time, right? So, sometimes they don't, and they can't control how the fights play out, right? You can make a fight that you say, like, hey, look, Shevchenko and Grasso had two previous fights were both exciting, right? They were both fun fights. Who thought it was going to be so horrendous on the third time? But it turned out to be that way. And you just have to accept that. But the UFC generally, their pay-per-view cards are evenly matched, and they usually deliver all the way down through the card, not just on the main event. Where you get into the boxing matches and look at what the odds were on the fights the other day, and then it turned out to play that way. Stephen Fulton was like minus 950. Plant was a huge favorite over McCumbee. Lara was a 3-1 favorite. That was like the close fight over Garcia. Canelo was a 20-1 favorite. Canelo was freaking 3-1 to score a knockout, to win by knockout. They are not giving you anything for your money. Give me, and I don't even need it to be names. I mean, it would be better if they were names that people recognize and they were in even matches and fun fights on the undercard. But if your matchmaker said, we're going to put on kick-ass fights that people are going to go, whoa, and I love this, and they're fun fights, okay, do it. Give us something for the money so that you're entertained and not just having to slog through 12 rounds of, two guys that don't want to be there.
Well, Kevin, that wraps up a big week for you. Now with you doing your own YouTube channel and your own website, was this still one of the busier weeks you've had in a long time?
It's funny. There's always a lot of these busy weeks, right? Being that I do both boxing and MMA, but the sphere element itself, like it went beyond just the fights, right? And now I had the UFC 306 fights, I had the Canelo fights, and then I had the sphere as like a third entity that I had to cover. So that really kind of made it, a little extra, right? But I did good traffic wise last week. I was really happy with that. I felt like I provided, let me pat myself on the back, which I try not to do too often, but I felt like I provided really good, thorough coverage on before the fight and fight night. And it was fun. I had a blast. I love doing it. And hey, look, I'm going to DWCS tonight. I'm going to go see the Contender Series. And do I have to do that? No, but I'm going because I love to be at the fights. I love, and I love talking to fighters. That's what it's all about.
Well, I will tell you, Kevin, I'll pat you on the back. I was enthralled with all the week of coverage that you had there. You have some of the best content, if not the best content in combat sports on the net. Not only in print, but now with the video. I mean, I get up in the morning, I'm saying, all right, what does Kevin Iole on his YouTube channel have on there? So you're doing a great job there. What else you got going on that people can get a hold of you and where they can see your stuff?
Well, pretty much Kevin Iole everywhere but Twitter. So Instagram, Facebook, I'm Kevin Iole. On Twitter, Kevin I, or I should say X. On X, I'm Kevin I. My YouTube channel is also Kevin Iole. So, and my website, which is the most important one to me, go to my website, keviniole.com. I appreciate it.
Well, Kevin, as always, buddy, good to talk to you.
All right, George, I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.